then go all the way to the far right where it shows volume dollars. A lot of people don't understand these last two columns. The volume on a sale is always split 50-50 between the list side and the sell side. So for this example, the pending price was $250, so the listing agent gets $125,000 in volume, and so does the selling agent. That middle column, volume percentage, is referring to if the commission on each side is shared in any way. For example, if you were on a team, it might be that you get 50%, your team leader gets 50%, so that would be split there. Or it might be some other supervisory arrangement on your team. It may be split like, 60, 30, 10 or something like that. In this instance, in my example, we've got one agent on each side. So that 125,000 volume is split 100% to this one agent. Always put the other agent on the sheet as well. Let's scroll on down. The whole bottom half is information that the lender and the attorneys will need. And you also need to know who to be in touch with. For whichever side of the transaction you are representing, in this instance, the seller, put all the information, all the contact information. As a manager, I especially want a phone number. You might say, well, why do you care? You're not going to be calling my client, and I hope I won't be. But we have had emergency situations come up where agents were unavailable. We've needed to get in touch with a client, and you really need a phone number to be able to do that. For the other side of the transaction, definitely put the buyer's name, but of course you don't need all their personal information. We just need the contact information for whichever side of the deal you are representing. For the attorney and mortgage, fill that in. That's good for us, again, if questions come in, but also everybody involved in the deal needs to know who is representing who. And then at the very bottom, that's for if you're paying or a referral fee. Okay, so you won't use that a whole lot, but if you're paying out a referral fee, you put that information there. All right, that's a little bit on the info sheet. Now let's talk about the actual physical process and timeline. So you get a deal pended, you turn in the info sheet and all your paperwork to your ASC. They process it, create a file, and your manager's going to review it, write any notes to you if you're missing forms. Everything goes well, your deal gets closed. The one thing that we get a lot of questions about from new agents is about their commission check. So I want to talk about that timeline. Please make sure the attorney closing the buyer side of the deal, because that's who's going to be doing the dispersing, that they know what to do with your commission check. Most people just have it mailed in. Some people still choose to go physically pick it up at the attorney's office and deliver it to our office. That is not necessary at all, but some people just choose to do that. And then if you're using MG Law, who is our partner, they actually wire the commission checks. But one thing that you may not be aware of, attorneys do have up to 72 hours to record and disperse. Not often do they take that long, but they can, by law, have that long to record and disperse. So that's 3 days. Then if they put it in the mail, it could easily be a week or more before your check gets to our office. As soon as we get it, if your file is complete and approved, your check is processed. But we only cut checks on Tuesdays and Thursdays. So if your check comes in the mail or you drop it off on a Friday, you're not going to get that check paid to you until the next Tuesday. Okay? A lot of times we get a ton of calls, where's my check, where's my check, where's my check? And a lot of times we haven't even received it because it can easily take a week for us to get it, especially if it comes through the mail. So for most folks, once you get rolling and your checks are coming in on a regular basis, it doesn't matter as much. But just know when you get that first couple going, you're not going to close on Thursday afternoon and have your check in your bank Thursday night. It just doesn't happen that quick. Okay. All right. I think that's everything on that part of just what happens here within the office. Does anyone have a question on that? If you do, just unmute yourself and shout it out. Okay. So now we're going to move on to what your roles are once you have that contract. All right. It looks like the first one John has up is representing the seller. Okay. So if you got those handouts, pull that out. One of the first things you need to do is make sure you pinned the deal in MLS. By rule, that has to be done within 5 days of ratification, or you can be fined. Turn the contract in. You've already turned your listing file in. We've got that. Turn the copy of the contract in with the completed info sheet. Okay, that info sheet needs to be, now you're going to update it. You prepared it when you did the listing. You put the seller's information on there. Now you're going to put the rest of the information and turn in an updated info sheet. Make sure you get a copy of the ratified contract to your seller, and then send, scan and email the contract, listing agreement, and info sheet to the attorney or that's closing it and to the other side's attorney. You might want to come up with some standard little email that you use, especially if you deal with some of the same people as, hi, this is Cindy. I have another contract for you. You will be representing whichever side of the deal it is, and just send them all the information. All right, the next thing we're going to talk about on this list are some of the inspections and things that you were responsible for making sure happens. As the seller, you're going to order the termite inspection and the well and septic inspections, if that applies. It's critical here, though, that those can't be done any earlier than 30 days ahead of closing. Most of our closings are still happening in 30 to 45 days, so that doesn't usually happen, but you don't want to jump the gun. If you've got like a 45-day closing and you order it and we're still 40 days away from closing, it won't count. The lender wants a current inspection report, which they consider to be within 30 days. And as far as the logistics of how you order that, your seller may have someone that they're used to doing business with. If not, agents in the office can help you come up with vendors that provide those services that you can get in touch and schedule those with. Those are paid for by your seller at closing. So those invoices and reports, when you get them in, you need to send those copies to the closing attorneys. If there's an HOA package, you and the seller are responsible for getting that ordered and delivered. That in and of itself can sometimes be a process. It totally depends on the HOA, who's managing it. A lot of the bigger ones like Community Group and some of those have a website that you go to, you create an account, and you, the agent, can place the order and you put on there that you want it paid for at closing. And all those invoices are sent to the closing attorneys. Sometimes, I'm sure y'all have seen the emails, people, who knows how to find this HOA package, because sometimes, especially in older communities, it's a little trickier to find. Keep tight records on that as far as get it ordered as soon as possible, because sometimes it can take 2 weeks to get them. Get it delivered to the buyer's agent right away and make note of when you have delivered it. Either get an email confirmation, or you can use Authentisign or some other way to document that you delivered it, because then your 3-day clock starts for the buyer, where they have 3 days to review it and they can get out of the deal for any reason during that 3-day period. So make sure you get it delivered, document the delivery, and keep track of the 3 days. Any questions on HOA stuff?
Cindy, I'm sorry, this is Carolyn.
Yes, ma'am.
So do you get an HOA package as soon as you do the listing, or do you wait until you have a buyer?
I would say you wait till you have a contract,
Okay.
because it does have to be current. Now, in this market, it's kind of one and the same. You maybe could order it when you take the listing just because it takes 2 weeks and then it would still be good. But in that rare instance that it, something goes wrong or a closing's delayed or it's a longer closing, then your package wouldn't be current and the seller would have to pay for an update.
Thank you.
Okay, very good. All right, the next item on the list is referring to oil and propane. Per our contract, that's one of the costs that is prorated at closing if the seller wants to do that. So you would need to get your seller to contact the oil company. They do their measuring. They send a letter that says there's this many dollars worth of oil or propane, and the buyer is charged for that, and the seller is credited at closing. So that once again, all that gets sent to the closing attorneys. You're also working on the inspection addendum during this time period. Usually, just watch your timelines. The buyer side is really more critical. They've got X number of days to get that inspection done and get it returned to you. But then from the time they deliver it, you as the listing agent and your seller, you all have 7 days to get that worked out. So definitely stay on top of those timelines. Make notes of when you receive the inspection addendum. Keep track of making sure you respond in time and all of that. Assuming some repairs are agreed to, you've got to follow up on those. Normally, your seller has folks that they want to use, or sometimes you have to recommend a contractor. But we take for granted that sellers and buyers understand all this because we talk about it every day. A lot of them don't. I've had some wonderful sellers who, as soon as they get that repair addendum, they just start fixing things or start hiring people to do it because they think, well, that's what I'm supposed to do. So make sure your clients understand the process, that they're only going to have to fix the things that end up being agreed to. That those repairs do have to be done by a licensed contractor in most instances, that they will need paid receipts showing that the work is done, or if the receipt's going to be paid at closing. Sometimes if something big like a roof is done, it's agreed upon that it's going to be paid out of the proceeds at closing. So you need to make sure that invoice gets sent to the closing attorney so it can be put on the closing documents. But just keep tabs on the repairs, and remember they have to be done before closing. All this while you're staying in touch with the buyer's agent on the loan. You will get the phone call about the appraisal. Usually the appraiser calls the listing agent directly and schedules that. But then you may not hear if the appraisals come back in, if it was good. Usually no news is good news. If an appraisal comes in low, usually that agent's on the phone with you pretty quick trying to sort it out. But just follow up with the agent to make sure all of that has been done. Home warranty. If there's a warranty in place, if the seller wanted it at the time of the listing, you've probably already ordered it. But if it comes up as part of the contract, if the seller's paying for it, the listing agent orders it, send all that info in to the closing attorneys. Just because you get that application filled out, that's just the beginning. You, the agent, are responsible for getting that warranty ordered. You can call our rep, Katie Richards, if you have any problems, but Cinch has a website that you go on and order that through as well. You'll get an invoice generated, and that is what you send to the closing attorney. Okay, now we're kind of getting closer to closing. In Virginia, sellers and buyers close separately and can use different attorneys. So the seller is going to be called in to sign the deed. And sometimes that's done, 3 days to a week ahead of closing. It just kind of depends on the timelines of everyone. But they're going to go in and sign the deed first. so that all that can then be sent over to the buyer's attorney. Also remind your seller during this time that they need to put in phone calls to have their utilities disconnected, because the buyer can't usually get their service connected till the seller's made a call first, but they do need to leave them on through the date of closing. And of course, if it's a weekend or something like that, you may want to have to play with the dates a little bit, but definitely leave it on through closing. The final walkthrough will be scheduled by the buyer's agent. At that time, it's ideal if the seller can be out of the house. That's not always possible, but it's ideal. All repairs need to be done, and everything still needs to be turned on and all of that, so when they're walking through, they can check on things. That's when you should have those receipts ready as well for any repairs that were done. And usually at the walkthrough, skipping down to the next item, usually at the walkthrough, it's agreed upon that the buyer's agent will take the keys out of the lockbox and take it with them to closing to give to the new buyer. You can tell your seller to leave any extra keys and garage door openers at the house. I'm going to kind of flip over to the buyer side real quick. Those keys cannot go into the buyer's hand till after closing. So if you're the agent on the buying side, just because you pick them up at the walkthrough, do not give them to the client. The house is not theirs until closing. It's just a convenience thing that it's easier for you to pick it up and take it to the buyer's closing. So you as the agent hold on to those keys until the closing table.
Cindy?
Yes.
One quick question. Along with keys and garage door opener, any issues with smart devices in the house at this point, as far as making sure the new people will be able to use them and any of those things?
I haven't specifically heard that come up, but sure, if there's anything they need to know, a lot of people don't leave some of their smart devices, but I guess, typically just tell your seller any information that the buyer would need, maybe leave a paper there that explains it or something like that. But most times I think those things get handled between the two agents before closing. But that is a good reminder. It used to always be garage door openers got forgotten. Now we have smart devices to think about. Okay. Before closing, you as the agent should be sent a copy of the CD, the settlement statement, the closing documents. You aren't privy, of course, to all the ins and outs of the deal, so you don't know if all the numbers are right, but you should make sure that the commission is correct. You should make sure that the termite, home warranty, any other inspections or invoices that are supposed to be paid are properly reflected on there. Once the property has closed, as the listing agent, you need to get over there promptly and get your sign and lockbox off the property. And now you need to also mark your listing closed in MLS. You have up to 7 days before getting fined, but it's best just to do it right away. And then the last is to send a thank you note to the seller, and if anybody referred that to you. All right, any questions on that side before we move to the other side of the deal? Okay, so now we're going to go to when you're representing the buyer. A lot of it's the same or very similar. We've already talked about as soon as you get that contract, turn it in with a completed info sheet and the EMD. Get a copy of the contract to your client, deliver a copy to the seller, fax or email the contract and info sheet to the buyer's attorney and the lender. On the buyer side, you're going to have more to do with the lender. You're going to probably stay in touch with how things are going. Is it in underwriting? Is it out of underwriting? Just what's going on with it. A lot of lenders, like I said, send out those automated updates that tell you where they are in the process, but definitely stay on top of that. As the buyer's agent, you are responsible for scheduling the home inspection right away. Get that scheduled. Find out if your client has a preference for someone, or you can recommend someone, remind your buyer that that's something they have to pay for outside of closing. So they need to bring their checkbook with them. So you get the inspection done. You meet with your client and decide which repairs or what kind of credit you're going to ask for, and you send all of that over to the listing agent. Make sure that's done within the number of days that you stated in the contract. And then, as I said, that's when the 7-day negotiation period comes up into play. So you may get that to the seller. Sometimes people get confused about the timeline. Maybe in your contract, you had an inspection period of 15 days, but you got lucky, were able to get it scheduled and done early, and you send it over actually on day 10 after ratification. Those other 5 days are now just gone from the process. Once you deliver everything, that is when the negotiation period starts. So if you got it to them on day 10, for the next 7 days, you and the listing agent will be negotiating for your clients on which things are going to end up being dealt with as far as repairs. Just like we've asked the listing agent to stay on top of them, you need to be checking in as well. How are things coming? Is everything going to be done on time? All of that. Okay. I just saw it. You will not order the HOA package. That's going to be typically ordered by the seller, but you need to make sure you get it. You are really more on the hook with the timeline than the listing agent, because they don't really have control over how quick they get it. So there's not a specific number of days in which they have to provide it to you. But once it's in your hands, once they have delivered it to you, the buyer's agent, that is when your 3 days, your client's 3 days starts. So please do not let it sit in your email for 2.5 days and then send it over. Or worse yet, let it sit there for 4 days, because then your buyer's right to rescind is gone. We've already talked about the proration letter. Like I said, the seller usually takes care of getting that, but make sure your buyer's aware that that's something they're going to have to pay for. The appraisal, that's handled by the lender. Warranty, sometimes the buyer and agent has to handle the ordering, but that's the same process. Make note of when you get the package, get it to the buyer right away. Schedule the walkthrough, check up on repairs, then the rest is kind of the same. Picking up the keys, we've already talked about that. Reviewing the settlement statement and sending any appropriate thank you notes. So this is kind of a quick and easy one, unless you all have questions. I will remind you that these 2 checklists, the contract to closing, are in your Infinity training book. So not only do you have them where John sent them to you just now, but you've always got them as a reference in your training book. I'm looking through my notes to see if there's anything else I wanted to mention, but you all pipe in if you have any questions. Has anybody had any problems they've encountered that they want to know how they should have handled or could have handled? Okay, well, you guys are an easy group today. This is just kind of like the logistics, but it's things you need to know. I think new agents, sometimes they get the deal and they're like, oops, what do I do? So just remember, these lists are in your manual. Your manager and your ASC are there to help you with any questions. But just do everything as quick as possible. Get that contract and paperwork turned in right away. Get anything ordered as soon as possible. Just really stay on top of your timelines. And if you've got any question about timelines, check with your manager. Okay, anything else?
Not right now.
Thank you.
All right.
Thanks,
Well,
Cindy.
thank you guys. And I hope